Look at these pictures that are surfacing. Now, not all of these have been verified, right? But aren't they beautiful pictures? So I want to talk about Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Wagner Group. And I know we've talked a lot about Yevgeny Prigozhin. We've talked a lot about mercenaries, right? And it's not just because I have a deep personal interest in mercenaries, right? Because I think it's a very interesting topic, and it's a topic that deserves attention, does not get a lot of attention. There's also, of course, the fact that Yevgeny Prigozhin led a coup against the Russian government. That's what some people call it. I think mutiny is probably a better definition of it, since it was not necessarily, depending upon your interpretation, an attempt to overthrow Putin. It was an attempt to kidnap General Gerasimov and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. It was an attempt to get more influence and power from the Russian military. So I think mutiny, since it wasn't directly meant to overthrow Putin's government, as far as we know, is maybe a better way to put it. But it was a large mutiny, and it deserved a lot of attention. But we're not talking about it because of a new development with the mutiny or Wagner. You know, oh, we found some breaking news story about what Yevgeny Prigozhin's really doing. Well, we do have one aspect of it, and we're going to start with that. But the reason we're talking about Yevgeny Prigozhin today is I want to talk about Russia's reaction to the coup, specifically Russian state media. Because Russian state media has been, let's just say, unprepared for the Wagner mutiny, the Wagner coup, whatever you want to call it. Wagner's fun day out, you know. Wagner gone wild, whatever you want to refer to what happened. They were unprepared. And that was most clearly shown by the fact that when it was happening, state TV would either be playing smooth jazz to distract people about what was, you know, going on. They would cut from commercial break, turn back to the camera and say back to commercial, because they hadn't gotten the prerogative from the Russian government on how to spin Wagner soldiers, criminals and rapists that they had armed, marching on their own capital. It's a hard spin. You have to be a fantastic spin doctor to look at your own soldiers that you armed, turning their guns on you, shooting down your own planes, shooting down, what was it, like 7 helicopters, and a command aircraft, quite an expensive command aircraft, mind you. It's hard to spin that, and they didn't really know how to do it at the time. But now that the dust has started to settle, over the last 10 days, we've seen more of a stronger narrative start to develop, but there's still some infighting. There's still some pushback. And I want to use one new, semi-newer development, a development that we're getting more and more of, more pictures from, to show this fact. So recently, some photographs were posted online showing Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner Group's, he's the leader of the organization. He was a former street thug who served time in prison for being a street thug, and I mean that as bluntly as possible. He then became a hot dog salesman, no joke, then a caterer for the president, Putin, and then he became the warlord. And so he's built up quite a fortune over that time. And so people were showing his home. They were sharing it on Russian social media after these pictures got out of just how extravagant his home is. Look at this. He's got like an in-house little medical center. He's got a look at that, the beautiful Wagner flag and the beautiful, you know, medals and all of these wigs and different IDs and passports. That's a little weird, but anyway, back to the wealth. He's got a pool. And I think, is that a child's slide? What is that on? I like to imagine Prigozhin sliding down that slide. It's probably a beautiful image. Workout room, extravagance, and wealth, a hot tub. But the thing that tripped me up the most isn't necessarily the wealth that he lives in as he takes these prisoners from squalor and sends them in these, what people call human wave tactics. There's a little bit more intelligence given to them.
Morally,
you know, there's a little bit more intelligence than just human wave tactics, but essentially human wave tactics as he's living in so much wealth. But the thing that interested me the most were the wigs. Why does he have wigs? Do you guys know why he has wigs? Do you guys know? IMB Mike, thank you so much for the tier 1 and being sub for 15 months. I mean, they are looking for a new James Bond. I can't think of a better option right now. Than Prigozhin, absolutely. So before today's stream started, I saw this appear on my feed. And I'm sorry, this is not exactly related to the media. It's somewhat related, and we're going to bring it back to the media's response in a second. But this is just too funny. Look at these pictures that are surfacing. Now, not all of these have been verified, right? But aren't they beautiful pictures? So that's why he has a wig. So that's why he has all these different passports. Who would have thought that the shadowy leader of a mercenary group would be such a fashionista? It's not surprising. I mean, for example, if you look over here, that's the Libyan flag in the background. And the Wagner group has worked extensively with Libyan warlord Khalifa Haftar in Africa, in Libya. So him putting on all these outfits, what is this? Come on. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. But I wanted to make this connection that the wigs are because, you know, he is the master of disguise, okay? He's like the spy from TF2. What's that one guy from Lazy Town? Robbie Rotten? He's like Robbie Rotten. He's got like a million different costumes to put on when he gets up to his evil schemes of beating people to death with sledgehammers throughout Africa. Real thing that happened, by the way. Real thing that happened. Anyway, the mention of these wigs, because again, Yevgeny Prigozhin up until very recently was a more obscure figure doing mercenary work in Africa through subsidiaries that were set up to obscure the Kremlin's accountability and being held directly, held accountable for the Wagner Group's actions as an extension of the Russian state in Africa. By using the Wagner Group, they've been able to have plausible deniability in their actions, and by, acting so mysterious and like the master of disguise, that gave them more plausible deniability. But as Vladimir Putin has come forward and he said, look, we paid all their budgets and we supported Wagner, that plausible deniability is gone. And so instead of pretending like Yevgeny Prigozhin isn't directly working under the auspices of the Russian government like they have been doing for years, now they're just admitting to it in their attacks on him and trying to discredit him in some strange ways, considering their government was, directly responsible for much of the activities he was engaged in. Let's look at how the Russian media is finally reacting to Wagner with vitriol and anger, and a lot of anger that he's not getting punished. Now, this example right here is of the Russian media showing Prigozhin's home getting raided, getting searched, showing the wealth, and then he comments on the wigs. Let's check this out.
Валюта.
Here we're looking at a house in the home of Yevgeny Prigozhin. Prigozhin's foreign currency is just lying around like that, in boxes tied with rubber bands. Let's look at the palace of the fighter with corruption and crime, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Here's the palace. Here's his home. By the way, his daughter makes streams from this home, not always in a proper state. She records some of her videos and posts them from this palace. Now, this is a garage. We see that in his home, investigative measures were carried out as well. A helicopter. Now, really, one second, let me go back. He speaks kind of fast. Now, really, every person should have a helicopter in their yard. Yevgeny, how have you got a helicopter? You have it? No one has a helicopter. Just for you, when you go out and fly, if there's traffic you see, you're a decent person, you've got sacks of money of $6.6 million by some estimates. The Fighters for Justice and 600 million rubles. Weapons. Look at how many weapons. Where are these weapons from? Who do they belong to? What do you mean check where these weapons are from? Wagner, the whole army. Well, each person must keep weapons with permission. You've got 5, 6, 7 rifles. There should be 7 certificates for keeping and bearing weapons for Mr. Prigozhin. Just a message here. That sounds like a bunch of libtard talk. They're getting scarily close to gun licenses and gun control there over in Russia. I'm sure all those red-blooded Americans who simp for Putin are very concerned about this. Let's look at an interesting spot. The wardrobe. Oh, there's the sledgehammers. Nicely packed as well. Such a set to go with the sledgehammers, presents of sorts. These boxes do look more like coffins, though, but these are also unique exhibits. This is from a weapon safe, it seems. Well, there is the weapon safe, and these ones will lie there. Oh, the wardrobe. The secret of Yevgeny Prigozhin. The wigs. Question. Why would he have wigs in his home? Why would a person that we all know how he looks like need a wig? Wig, makeup, etc. All that was found and was discovered in the home of Yevgeny Prigozhin. Next, we must see the secrets of Yevgeny Prigozhin. The huge number of passports. Well, I think that every decent person should have as many passports as Yevgeny Prigozhin does. By one passport, he is Oleg Semenov. By the other, he's really Yevgeny Prigozhin. There is Yevgeny Prigozhin, yes. The other one, Borbov Vladimir Vasilyevich. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing his fake name. Don't want to be disrespectful. Prigozhin as well. There was just Petrov, last name missing. Ah, there's Semenov. Semenov Oleg Yuryevich. And Prigozhin did present this passport. A normal person can't have these many passports. Even if they are real, this needs to be clarified. Who issued them? How he got these passports? Which documents he used to cross the border? Why did this person have such weird authority? Now really, it's like a serious leader of a crime clan. Now, the thing that gets me about this response, which was on Russian state TV, by the way, is everything he's bringing up are, I think, real critiques that you can make of Yevgeny Prigozhin or the Russian political system. Why does this guy, who has been a mercenary and criminal in order to build this wealth, have so much money and power? Why does he have all these guns and he can skirt the law so easily? Why does he have so many passports? Why does he have a helicopter? Why does he have all this? Look how he flaunts his brutality with the sledgehammers, which has become a symbol for the Russian military's brutality. But much of this is because he was directly enabled by the Russian government. Why does he have all these wigs? Why does he have all these passports? Why does he have all this money in cash? It's because he's a fucking mercenary. What do you mean? Why is he even asking the question? It's just like a bunch of question marks to make people think and be like, wow, oh my gosh, this Yevgeny Prigozhin guy does seem shady. Of course he's shady. He's supposed to be shady. That's his job. I'm sorry, I'm dying. I'm dying due to the irony here. His job is to be shady. He's a mercenary. He was hired by the Russian government to be a mercenary. He was sent to Libya to be a mercenary. He was sent to the CAR, the Central African Republic, to be a mercenary. Wagner's activities in Mali, mercenary activities. Syria, mercenary activities. All around the world, mercenary activities. His job was to be a cloak and dagger mercenary, not only engaged in direct, like, fighting around the world for dictators and authoritarian regimes and for engaged in horrific brutality. Not only was that his job, but his job was also to spread disinformation in the United States. He was the founder. I don't know if you guys know this, but Yevgeny Prigozhin, before a lot of this more Wagner stuff became more public knowledge and he really cut his teeth on Ukraine, became more well-known around the world, he was most well-known for the troll farms. And something he's become pretty proud of recently, and he's a lot more open about, was the fact that during the 2016 election, Yevgeny Prigozhin was organizing troll farms to try to benefit Donald Trump's chances of winning in the 2016 presidential election. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Internet Research Agency, the arm of the Russian government that was set up specifically to spread misinformation, to try to engage in psyops in the United States, but that's his group. That's his thing. That's his thing. I don't know if people know this. This guy has been involved in different ways of asymmetrical warfare, mercenary work, spreading disinformation, troll farms for the entirety of his career in Russian politics and the Russian government. And before that, he was a common street thug. He was a common criminal who became a hot dog vendor and then a caterer for the Russian dictator, Vladimir Putin, Russian president, whatever you want to call him, Vladimir Putin. And now everybody is aghast and shocked that he has some shady things in his apartment, that he has multiple passports. Yes, he had that for his job as a mercenary. Why does he have all these guns? Mercenary. Why does he have all this cash? Because he's a mercenary. How do you think? And he even said this. Prigozhin even responded on Telegram. The reason I have all this cash is because that's how we pay our soldiers. We pay them in cash, which is totally not a shady thing to do. The Russian government did not only allow Prigozhin to engage in this shady, disgusting activity, but they encouraged it. And now that it's come around back to bite them, now they're aghast and angry and complaining that all the money they gave to the criminal to engage in mercenary work around the world, he then used it to engage in criminal activity against the Russian government as well. They wanted Prigozhin war criming other people. They wanted Prigozhin executing other people in other countries. They wanted Prigozhin using his brutal mercenaries to brutalize other countries, not turning those weapons of war on them. The problem isn't that Prigozhin is a criminal. That's not the problem. The problem with Prigozhin isn't that he's a mercenary. That's not the problem with the Russian government. The problem with Prigozhin is that he looked out for himself before he looked out for Putin, before he looked out for the Russian government. But, I mean, once a common street thug, not always a common street thug, but at least in his case, it doesn't seem that much has changed from his times, you know, engaging in criminal activity on the streets. It doesn't seem like it's changed very much. But this is just one example of the quite ironic response that Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Wagner Group has gotten after being, hoisted up as heroes of the Russian Federation for conquering Bakhmut and for fighting against the Ukraino-Nazis. But let's keep going. We've got more stuff we can show. This is from 9 days ago. This is from when the narratives against Prigozhin finally started to develop. This is Russian state TV. In fact, the Russian state TV commentators you're about to look at are some of the most popular Russian state TV commentators in the entire country, including Solenyev, who hosts one of the most popular Russian state TV shows out there. Let's look at what he has to say, as he and others are displeased that Putin let Yevgeny Prigozhin go and let much of the Wagner Group go. And supposedly, according to the deal, which is supposed to be in place right now, Wagner Group fighters can still go to Belarus and follow the mercenary out of the country. 1 second, I'm getting comments in chat, and I usually ignore them during segments because, you know, I want to get through the segment, I want to concentrate. But it's like he gave me money, and therefore, as a shill, as a dirty American capitalist, I have to read this. 100 biddies from Mr. Moto. Dylan, aren't you pro-reform? Haven't you seen how prisoners become great cooks in all those movies? Maybe they just thought he was great. That's true. That's true. That's a good point. Maybe a millionth time's the charm. Maybe this time he won't sledgehammer anybody. You never know. You never know, man. Let's watch this. Oh. Now, to be clear, this was right after the coup. So this is right at the start of the coup. But I'm just showing you this to show how much the narrative around Wagner has changed on Russian state TV. Russian social media and others still somewhat defend him to some extent. Some people do. Some people in the Russian military blogger space, even if they don't defend him personally, or even sometimes his actions, will still support the general sentiment of why people supported and why the Wagner Group, why people supported the mutiny, why people supported the march on Rostov. But let's look at the state media perspective. This was shortly after the coup. Yesterday was a scary day. When your phone is ringing off the hook. 1 second, it's double playback speed. You keep checking your messages. You're being asked questions, assuming that you know more than others. Even if you do know more than others, all information still has to be double-checked at a time when information is constantly changing. You have to be certain that you understand the general meaning of what is happening. You know, it's one thing to be displeased by somebody. It's another to go against the country, against the people, against the supreme commander, elected by popular vote. Fortunately, they came to their senses. Yesterday, I had a feeling that a real miracle happened. That is true. By the way, she's the head of RT. I was readying for the worst. All of us were.
А представляете, какой был бы кошмар?
Can you imagine the
на улицах
horror
Ростова?
that could have unfolded on the streets of
И как бы
Rostov?
подливали огонь.
How they would be stoking the
чеченцы с
fire.
русскими
The Chechens are fighting the Russians.
Даже это невозможно.
Would have been
Чеченцы
total
за
trash.
Россию
It's
воюют,
impossible to imagine.
Да, стали бы
Chechens are fighting for Russia against Russia. That's how they would inflame it. But it was successfully avoided.
Ведь все
Everything
уже
was already in
заготовки были,
place.
Все были готовы. все
Everyone
знали.
was waiting.
Была же
It was a
спланированная
pre-planned
медийная
media
операция.
operation.
Точно совершенно.
There will be a
Будет
separate investigation
отдельное расследование, кто планировал, как
as to who
планировал, как
planned it
финансировал.
and how it was financed.
Никогда ничего.
Nothing in
России
Russia
нельзя
can
решить
ever be
без этого.
solved with an uprising.
Никогда.
Never.
Любая попытка
Any attempt to organize a rebellion is a
это
weakness.
слабость.
Druidism has donated $5. Prigozhin should be buried alive, and not the auditory cunnilingus buried alive by avenged sevenfold. Worse. Much, much worse.
Jesus, okay. Well, you know what? Personally, I just want him to be a wrecking ball in the Russian political system. And then once he's done, maybe he'll just like fall over. Okay? That's what I would prefer.
Не сила. А сила,
The strength is in a Russian soldier.
но когда русский солдат
When a Russian soldier makes a mistake,
совершает ошибку, обратите внимание, Верховный
note that the
сказал,
Supreme said
через Дмитрия
through
Сергеевича,
Dmitry Peskov, his press
что мы не
secretary,
будем преследовать
that we won't prosecute the heroes
которые
who made this mistake
совершили эту ошибку. Из
out of
уважения
respect
к
for
ним.
their accomplishments.
Но есть такая фраза:
But there is an expression about that.
за вчера спасибо,
Thank you for
А за сегодня
yesterday,
ответим.
but be accountable for today.
за сегодня ответим.
Everyone will
Надо
have to
делать
draw
всё,
the
чтобы
right
перед теми
conclusions.
ребятами,
For those guys that were
которые в
holding
тот
the
момент,
line at
когда
the front,
25 тысяч с
when
тяжелой техникой,
25,000 with heavy equipment,
противовоздушными
with
системами,
anti-aircraft systems,
тысячи с лишним
on more
машин
than 1,000 vehicles,
пошли не на
they
Киев,
didn't march on Kiev, Lviv, or
Yeah.
Warsaw.
не на
I like how he just throws in Warsaw. It just shows how fucking insane Soleniev is. He's constantly called for like marching on Warsaw, marching on Berlin. Again, like one of the more popular state media talking heads, but also batshit insane.
Варшаву. А пошли на
They
Москву.
marched on Moscow.
А их товарищи, с которыми они
While their
плечом к
comrades,
плечу бились
along
все эти
whom they
месяцы,
fought, shoulder to shoulder for all these months, stood there, holding the front line.
повторю 156
I will
раз.
repeat for the 156th time,
Что
so
было?
everyone will understand.
Россия,
Russia above all.
Россия, наша родина.
Russia, our motherland.
Да.
They're just screaming. They're just kind of like screaming for just rah, get the people into support. Rah, America! Woo! Could you imagine? Like PMC McDonald's almost takes DC. Then we have like our press secretary just go on TV, or we have like NPR. NPR is not the equivalent here, but we have like state media talking heads. I don't think there's an equivalent in the United States here, but government officials just go out there and say, USA, USA, USA. In any other context, this would get laughed out of the room.
Мы
We were
ходили
cruising
на теплоходе по
the Volga
Волге.
River.
Мы
We get back to an armed
а в
mutiny
России
in
матушке
Mother Russia.
вооруженный мятеж. И первое время мне
At
казалось,
first,
что это снится,
I thought I was
что этого не
dreaming.
может быть.
I thought this could not be
Но для
happening.
человека, хоть
For a
шапочно
person,
знакомого с
even
историей, такое
tangentially
déjà vu.
familiar with history.
Подождите,
This
это
is
только
such
что
deja
было.
vu.
Только что была Первая
Listen,
мировая,
this just
которая
happened.
уже была
World War
почти
I just
выиграна,
happened.
и ровно
We
в этот
almost won,
момент случился
but mutiny
вооруженный мятеж, в
happened right
результате
at that
которого и
moment.
Первую мировую
Because of that, we
проиграли,
lost World
и
War
территории
I,
потеряли,
lost our
и страну
territories, destroyed,
разрушили
and
и
lost our
проиграли.
country.
Как опять?
What
Третий
again?
раз за 100 лет.
For the third time in 100 years? Isn't it interesting how the Russian state TV will like throw like communist revolutionaries and others under the bus? Putin will do this also when referring to like this incident that she's talking about in World War I, but then will then use the Soviet Union, which came afterwards as a result of that revolution, to justify their colonialism and imperialist goals overseas, like in Ukraine, saying that Ukraine is an artificial state created by the Soviet Union. They built up Ukraine during the Soviet Union, even though much of that labor was Ukrainian, much of that material was Ukrainian, much of the scientific development that helped progress Ukraine was Ukrainian. They'll claim it and then use it as a justification to conquer Ukraine and call Ukraine part of Russia. It's very interesting.
Нет
There is nothing more
ничего
frightening
страшнее
in the world
гражданской войны.
than
Когда
civil
мы все
war.
нормальные люди говорим
When all
сейчас
of
о
us
ситуации
normal people
с Украиной
say
и
about
с НАТО,
Ukraine and the
что
situation
мы
with
за мир
NATO,
после
that
победы,
we are for peace after
это когда
victory,
мы сражаемся
that's
с
when we are
врагом.
fighting against an enemy.
Потому что с врагом
There can only be
может быть
peace
мир
with the
после
enemy
победы.
after victory.
А когда ты
But when you're
сражаешься с
fighting against your
братом,
brother,
никакой победы быть
there
не
can't be
может.
victory for
Ни
anyone.
у кого. Брат на брата
Brother
это
against brother
война
is war.
без возможности.
So the line from state TV for Yevgeny Prigozhin is a little harsh, very harsh. In fact, let's go a little bit further. We'll go to Solovyev, and we'll the person that I talked about earlier, one of the more popular state talking heads. He more concentrates on the weaknesses that has been exposed by Prigozhin's coup and the weaknesses Prigozhin and the Wagner Group caused in Russia as the railing against the Wagner Group intensifies and as the anger about their unaccountability over killing Russian airmen is brought more and more to the forefront. But this is, again, initially after the coup, right after the coup happened. Coup, mutiny, whatever you want to call it. He does not look happy. Just gonna say, nah, he does not look happy. Solovyev does not look happy in Russian state TV, does he? I really want us to draw conclusions out of everything that happened. It's vitally necessary for us. We have to figure out what happened. We have to appraise it. We need to leave all the emotions aside and give a very strict, sober account. I'm not sure you're going to like my thoughts. I believe we should drastically increase our armed forces, the size of our armed forces, and their combat readiness. We should saturate not only the front lines, but the home front with our armed forces. We should clearly understand a layered defense. You know what this sounds like? Oh, this sounds like it's like late Vietnam, South Vietnam, last year of the war, not looking too good. Like, okay, guys, I know the problem. First off, we need to make all of the locals like us. Second problem, we need to get more recruits. Third problem, we need to finance more aid to our country. Fourth problem, we need to deal with all the parts. It's like, oh yeah, simple solution, just fix the army. Oh wow. I can't believe nobody has thought about that. Somebody should go tell Shoigu, hey, fix the army. Maybe he hasn't thought about that yet. We should clearly understand a layered defense that we can put on high alert in the case of invasion on the territory of the Russian Federation. Knowing who is supposed to do what and when. Can I just say, and I know we've already kind of addressed this in other videos and I've said this before, but it goes mentioning again, okay? It goes mentioning again. It does deserve mentioning again. That we've gone from 3 days to a week to a month to conquer Ukraine to Solovyev, one of the biggest clowns on Russian state TV, but a pretty well-known clown, talking about the need to build up an army, a strong army that knows what they're doing in Russia itself, in case they get invaded or another mutiny happens in the future, because their flank is completely exposed. The purview, the conversation has shifted so dramatically. It's still shocking to me.
Кому переходит вся полнота власти на территории? Кто возглавляет координационный штаб? Как действует вся полнота власти
Who
на
will be given all authority on certain territories, who will be given charge of coordinating the headquarters,
как действует
how
разнообразные
various
службы,
agencies
как
will function,
блокируются дороги,
how the roads will be blocked,
с какой очередностью,
in
через
what
сколько
order,
минут,
with
и
what
кто
time intervals,
начинает выходить
and
по
who
тревоге,
will come out on
тормозить,
high
где и как
alert
это делать.
to slow them down, where and
Если
how
это
it will be
танковые
done.
колонны, что их
So anyway,
останавливает?
like we can watch the rest of this, but it was all of a similar theme. Russian state TV, like, wow, I can't believe Wagner would do this. This is a great betrayal. I'm really angry that Putin's gonna let them off. And hey, look how extravagant and wealthy he is and how shady Prigozhin is, even though Prigozhin's job was to be shady. His job for the Russian government was to be shady. He was a mercenary, head of a private military corporation, doing work for Khalifa Haftar in Libya, doing work for the Central African Republic, doing work for Bashar al-Assad in Syria. But on the other end of the spectrum, there lies another person who isn't as angry about Prigozhin getting let off, or at least the people who participated in the coup getting let off. And I want to talk about him because his name is Sergei Mardan. He is a hardcore Russian nationalist extremist who is often platformed on Russian state TV. He's a popular blogger, Russian nationalist blogger in Russia. And his purview of the war, his critiques of the war, are not the same as our critiques of the war. Our critiques of the war is that the war shouldn't be happening, that the Russians should leave, and then the war would be over. Simple as that. His critiques of the war is that they aren't fighting it brutally enough. Brutally enough. Here is something that was reported on by Newsweek. You can go read the specific words yourself. Actually, I think we might. Where Sergei Mardan said that he wants Kiev to be uninhabitable. Uninhabitable. In the morning, Caliber missiles started to fly towards Ukraine. They're flying towards the scent of diesel fuel, towards the scent of the Ukrainian armed forces. I'm curious, will all the lights go out before the 31st Orthodox Christmas? How will these, and he says the slur for Ukrainians, how will these slurs celebrate the new year in 2023? I would prefer that they celebrated it in total darkness. I would prefer it if Kiev became an uninhabitable city. I would prefer that on the night on December 31st, the unfortunate residents of Kiev would go off towards the border with Poland, leaving this cursed city, this cursed place behind them. Most of them will leave it forever. Now, this is just one example of him like calling for like a type of total war and displacing of, tens of millions of people, forcing them off of their homes so the Russian armed forces can continue their conquests. This isn't the only time he said something like this. Here is an example of him saying, monitored by the Russian media monitor, that Ukraine should be erased off the map.
Когда я вижу, когда я слышу.
1 second. I need to adjust. There we go. When I read the most shameful comments by our officials about some unknown Ukrainian nationalists,
непонятных, неизвестных мне украинских националистов или просто
or not even Ukrainian nationalists, they usually say,
обычно говорят, уничтожены просто
that we destroyed 60 or 160 or 1,060 nationalists. What is the reason for this bashfulness? Who is it for?
Для кого? Они не знают,
Don't they know in which army they're serving?
Они не в курсе?
Are they unaware?
То есть мы за
In 1 year, we figured it out.
Поняли, что
What this army is and how it's called. But someone still doesn't understand. Someone is still trying to spare our feelings. Someone is still worried that, God forbid, we are yet to decide for ourselves. We are yet to decide for ourselves that this formation that appeared on the map in 1991 by the name of the nation of Ukraine isn't the same chimera that should be simply erased off the map. People who self-identify as patriots of Ukraine are degenerates. People who are fighting for it are criminals. Taken separately, every one of them may be normal. For many of them, Russia is their native language. Russian is their native language. It doesn't change anything. Or Chiquito. Now, I don't know how to say his name. It's Chiquito. He's referring to a Russian serial killer. A Russian serial killer who could speak Russian. That's the premise of the comment he's about to make. For the serial killer, Russia was also his native language. Does that make him more acceptable? More normal? Should we be more sympathetic towards him? That if he was an American, a German, or a native of Burkina Faso? I don't understand how this is even relevant. I don't know which conclusion to draw from this. In 1 year, all conclusions have already been reached. These are simply animals. They don't need to be agitated to lose their human form. They have no human form anymore. There is no pity for any of them. Not one of them. This is whom the Russian army is fighting. Ghouls. Fighting against the undead who rose from the grave. Yes, just like on TV. So, the reason I show you this isn't only so I can pontificate about how disgusting it is for him to dehumanize Ukrainians like this, advocate for their nation to be wiped off the map, compare the average Ukrainian citizen to serial killers and ghouls. But my main purpose for showing you this, and also the SBU has charged him for calls for genocide and to, and here's it on the official government website, for calls for genocide against the Ukrainian people. So Ukrainians really, really don't like this guy. The reason I'm bringing him up is because this guy is not a huge critic of the Wagner Group people who participated in the coup. He doesn't like the coup. He doesn't like the mutiny, whatever you want to call it. But he is, to some degree, a defender of at least the motives of why they went out there, and a defender of the Wagner Group itself. Maybe of not defending directly the mutiny, but defending the organization and its fighters. And it's not a huge surprise that he's going to take a little bit of a different, tone and messaging than others on Russian state TV, because this isn't the first time he's been critical about how the war has been run. This is being reported on by the Daily Beast. This is from Julia Davis at the Russian Media Monitor from October 9th in 2022 last year. Him talking about how this guy, Sergei Margdan, I think it was on Solenyev Live, so it was on Solenyev's show. He said that the Russians underestimated Ukraine.
Bankrupt man.
The Russians underestimated Ukraine. They were not ready for the war. They were play fighting. And now they need to get more aggressive, more brutal, more disgusting. They need to engage the war in more totality. They need to be more maximalistic. They need to wipe these cities off the face of the earth. And so his main critique, which aligns much with Yevgeny Prigozhin's critiques of the Russian MOD, which aligns a lot with other Russian military bloggers' critiques of the Russian Ministry of Defense, is not that this war is worthless, even though Yevgeny Prigozhin during his march on Moscow said that the war was built on lies, but that the war must be fought in a more brutal and more aggressive manner, wiping cities off the face of the earth more than they already have done it in locations like Popasna and Bakhmut, and completely expelling their civilian populations. Now, when you understand that their critiques of the Russian MOD and how the war has been fought somewhat align, then it's not that surprising that this particular propagandist is upset that many on-state media, and this is where we're seeing the, I'm not going to say battle lines being drawn, but the lines where the narratives are being drawn, at least, are being kind of written into the sand right now. He's upset that many in-state media, after Wagner participated in this mutiny, are besmirching those who participated in this mutiny. Let's check out the segment. A human is a strange creature with a short memory.
Существо такое странное, с короткой памятью, особенно когда
Especially
он
when he
память
consciously
укорачивает,
shortens his memory.
так, вполне сознательно, добровольно,
And does so
с
voluntarily,
какой-то целью.
with a specific intent.
Вот я смотрел
For the last several
последние несколько
days,
дней
I've
на
been
массу
looking at a number of
публикаций,
publications,
репортажей, заявлений.
media reports, and
И
statements.
как-то мне очень
I
не
really
нравится такая резкая смена
dislike an abrupt
тональности
change of tone
по отношению
regarding the
к
same
людям,
people who
кого
we
мы
called
еще буквально
heroes
вчера
only yesterday.
называли героями,
We were proud of
гордились,
them, sincerely
правда,
proud of them.
по-настоящему искренне гордились, называли лучшей
But we
штурмовой
called them
пехотой
the best
в
infantry
мире
in the world.
с вагнерами.
I'm talking about the Wagnerites.
И вроде теперь
Suddenly,
уже
they are not
и
quite right.
какие-то они не такие, да и в общем и не
Not
особо
very effective,
эффективные,
and perhaps not quite heroic.
и может быть и не вполне героические. Я не очень
I
понимаю,
don't quite
почему.
understand why.
Я не очень
I
понимаю,
don't quite
с
understand
каких-то
since
пор
when.
у нас некоторые
Some people
люди, значит,
decided
решают,
to loosely
вольно
interpret
трактовать
the
такие чеканные,
precisely
очень
articulated
четкие
wording
формулировки верховного
of the
главнокомандующего.
Supreme Commander.
Путин дважды,
On two occasions, very clearly and
не допуская
unambiguously,
вот никаких толкований,
Putin formulated the government's
отношение
approach
государства к тому, что
towards
произошло
what
ровно
happened
неделю
1 week
назад.
ago.
Эти бойцы,
These fighters who heroically fought for
которые
Russia,
героически сражались
as part of
за
PMC
Россию
Wagner
в составе ЧВК «Вагнер», это
are
русские
Russian soldiers.
солдаты. Это наша
They are
общая
our
гордость.
common pride.
Вообще,
The Russian
русская
army
армия — это
is not an
понятие
organizational
не
concept.
организационное,
It's
не
not about an administrative
административное,
chain of
кто в чьем
command.
подчинении находится. Это
These are
просто
simply
русские
Russian
солдаты.
soldiers.
И любая
At
попытка
this
вот
point in
их
time,
сейчас, когда война не то что не закончилась,
when this war
даже
is
не
not over,
просматривается ее
but there is
конец,
also no
любая
foreseeable
попытка их хоть
end in
как-то
sight,
там
any
классифицировать,
attempt to
разложить по
classify them,
каким-то
to
отдельным
put them into
ячейкам,
different categories,
начать
to
их
start to compare
сравнивать,
them,
там вот закручивать
turn off the
тумблер
knob of
какое-то
admiration.
восхищение. Да это
This is
подло
simply
просто, в конце
ludicrous, don't
концов,
you
вам не
think?
кажется?
Let's not equate
Не
politics,
надо ставить
or
знак
rather one
равенства
politician,
между
to
политиканами,
soldiers who
точнее,
honorably carried
политиканами
out
и солдатами, которые с честью выполняли и выполняют
and
свой
continue to carry
долг
out
перед
their duty to
Россией.
Russia.
Они сражаются
They are
за
fighting
Россию,
for
они
Russia.
русские солдаты.
They are
Точка.
Russian soldiers,
Здесь
period.
вообще не
No
требуется
other
больше
commentary is
никаких
needed here.
комментариев,
No
обсуждений,
further
никаких
discussion or arguments.
споров.
No further discussion or arguments.
Потом,
In
когда-нибудь,
the future,
когда
when
историки
historians
начнут
start to
разбирать весь
examine
этот сюжет под
the
названием
topic of the special military
«Специальная
operation,
военная операция»
or a
или
holy
«Священная военная
military
операция»,
operation,
они будут там
they will
копаться.
dig through all of that. So his argument is, look. The historians, they'll figure it out later. But as of right now, the Wagnerites are patriots. Everybody now in Russian state TV is flip-flopping. All of a sudden, they're trying to criticize the Wagnerites. They're trying to criticize these heroes. I don't care. They are Russian soldiers. Period. End of paragraph. There's no debate. There's no discussions. I don't care how brutal they are. I don't care the type of behavior they behave in. They are engaged in a holy operation. He brings up some religious sentiment there. A holy operation against the Ukrainians. Therefore, we should support them, we should admire them, and we should be with them. And now I don't like this sudden change in tone and how they're talking about the Wagnerites. Now, I do think that on one hand, even from it, like, I disagree with them on every level, right? I don't think they should be invading Ukraine. I think the Wagnerites are a lot of armed criminals and mercenaries who have engaged in disgusting actions, not only in Ukraine with war crimes and sledgehammering of people who are unarmed and murder and torture, but they've also engaged in it around the world. And I agree with them on that. But they also shot down Russian aircraft, killed Russian airmen. I understand wanting to admire your nation's soldiers, but didn't the Wagner Group also kill Russian soldiers blatantly? And no one, not a single person, is going to go to prison for it? Except maybe General Surovikin. Who knows? Those reports are still kind of all over the place. I think there is a reason for people to be upset about that. But the problem also is for a lot of the Russian hardcore nationalist types, a lot of the Russian military blogger types, as a lot of Yevgeny Prigozhin's concrete criticisms of the Russian MOD were true. They were accurate. A lot of the sentiment that he used to try to propel himself towards Moscow, while it didn't take over the entirety of the Russian population and people didn't rush out to the streets of Moscow, there were people who supported what he was doing, specifically those in the Wagner Group, which does have more operational independence than the rest of the Russian military. There are people who know that many of the critiques that Yevgeny Prigozhin has made is accurate, that there are people out there that support the sentiment of the quote-unquote march of justice, and while on one hand, they could just throw away all the Wagnerites, right now, Russia needs as many good, concrete soldiers with experience fighting as ever. They need those soldiers more than ever right now. And so throwing them all away would probably not be so strategically beneficial, even if it means the Russian government looking a little weaker because they didn't penalize the people. Either way, there seems to be a narrative battle going on within the Russian state TV media sphere to some degree, but also within the Russian military blogger sphere about the narratives supporting the March on Justice, why people participate in the March on Justice, if people should be held accountable for the Russian airmen that died that day, for the 7 helicopters shot down, and the command aircraft shot down, killing more than about 20 Russian airmen in the process. If there should be any accountability for that. If there should be any accountability for directly leading a mutiny against the Russian government. And I think many Russians believe that it should, but they also know that turning against each other like that right now could cause more instability. And Yevgeny Prigozhin had Putin by the balls to some degree. While the idea of him conducting a full coup, a full successful coup, was not that likely, the idea of him actually overthrowing the Russian government, he did have a lot of leverage, the leverage of thousands of fighters approaching Moscow. And the Russian government, in a particularly difficult position, chose what it saw as the worst of many the best of many bad options, which was letting Prigozhin get away with it, at least temporarily, letting the wagnerites get away with it, at least temporarily, for the preservation of the Russian government today, and for there to not be chaos in the streets of Moscow as they're trying to lead an illegal invasion of another country. But the effects of this are going to be, whether or not it was the best option out of a list of long options, the effects of this are going to be felt for a long time. It's going to be felt in the way that oligarchs are making contingency plans. It's going to be felt in the way that a lot of the critiques of the Russian MOD are probably going to intensify, as not only Putin's government has somewhat looked weak, Shoigu and Gerasimov look weaker than ever, even if they've been able to somewhat do away with, or at least exile, one of their main political rivals to Belarus, Prigozhin. But the battle between the Russian military bloggers who think the war is being led horrendously, and against those who still stand with the Wagnerites, the media battle online, especially on Telegram, is heating up. It is heating up, and the problems that led to the Wagner coup, the infighting between the VDV, the private military companies, Wagner, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the conscripts, the infighting that a lot of Russian volunteers have reported, that's still there. Those issues are still there. They've just been released to the public, and the messaging has intensified. The messaging has intensified. Far from reassuring the Russian public that the government is strong, stable, and able to deal with these types of crises, due to the Russian government response, even if they were able to stop chaos on the streets of Moscow, they were unable to reassure the Russian public that this will be the end of troubles within the Russian Republic.